Hi, this is Jeff with Jeff's Handyman Service. We're here today to show you how to fix a leaking toilet gasket. If you come into your bathroom and your toilet has water around the base of it, most likely it's the gasket that needs to be replaced. Come into this bathroom with me, I'll show you how to do it. Come on. The water, if it's on the floor, it can go into the ceiling below the toilet. So it's most likely the toilet gasket, which is right down here. I'm going to show you how to fix it right now. Okay, first of all, you turn your water off at your supply. You flush the toilet to try to get as much water out of it as possible. Still going to be water in the tank, a little bit left. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to force the water out through the toilet. I can do the hand method because this is a clean toilet. And then we're going to use a sponge to get the rest of it. Now there's going to be some water left in the tank. Now this one also is going to need a new flusher. So we're going to replace that while we're here too. See how old and worn out it is and dirty it is? I'm going to throw that away. Okay, so now we're going to get all the rest of the water out of the tank. Put it in the bucket. Be careful you don't scratch these plastic seat covers. About 90% of it, maybe 95% of it. And I'm going to dump the water right into the shower to get rid of it. Next step. So what we're going to do is now the water's been shut off, all the water's been removed from the tank, where you're going to loosen the supply line from the tank. Okay, sometimes there's a little water left. Just have your sponge handy in case you gotta just soak it up real quick so it doesn't go through the floor to the bottom level. Now the next step is we have to take off the bolts that hold the toilet onto the floor. In order to do that, they have these little plastic caps on them. You lift the cap up a little bit, put a screwdriver underneath it, pop it off, and that will allow the bolt to be exposed. Now you just take your adjustable wrench and you go counterclockwise. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Take these off, make sure you don't lose them. A lot of times these are rusted and need to be replaced, but these look like they're in excellent shape. I happen to bring a set just in case. Okay, so now we've got the bolts, the nuts taken off of the toilet bolts, and we're ready to lift up the toilet. It's always good to have some rags nearby that you can set the toilet on so you don't crack your marble floor and so you don't damage the toilet. So I've got my rags, I've got my new gasket ready to go. If I had to replace the bolts, I'd have those ready to go. And we're going to lift the toilet up. It's probably going to have a little bit of water on it, but that's okay. It will go right in into the rag. All right. So this one came off pretty clean. But this is your old gasket, and you can see where the water's been leaking around the gasket. And it's been accumulating. So we're going to dry all that up, and we're going to take a putty knife, and we're going to scrape off that old gasket. And this stuff is nasty. You can see where it wasn't really making a good contact at the front, and that's probably where it was leaking. So we're going to scrape off this old gasket. Try not to touch it with your hands. All right, there's the old gasket. Get rid of that. Clean it up real good. Get rid of any poop that's left around the rim here. And then we've got our new gasket. Turn the toilet on its side, or on its back. Notice I'm on the rag so I don't crack anything. You're going to probably have a little water come out. And then if you look down here, this is where the gasket gets attached, right here. Okay? So we're going to open our new gasket. I like the extra thick ones. This is, I believe, a number 10. Yeah, it's a number 10 gasket. toilet flange wax gasket. And then this will slide right on here, and you push it on until it kind of stays by itself. Okay? Notice how it's kind of staying on by itself. Sometimes they'll pop off. The important thing is to get it centered on the hole, on the flange, so the toilet sits right. So now I'm going to pick the toilet back up, and I'm going to gently set it with these bolts equally spaced. All right, ready? All the extra water is going to come out, that's fine, no problem. Now we gently set it down so it's lined up on the bolts and in the middle of the hole. See how the bolts are coming through the hole? Right here. That way we know it's centered. And it's okay that it has a little bit of like a cushiony feel to it, because the gasket is, what it's doing is setting on the flange against the toilet. We're going to wipe up all this water because I want to make sure that when I start the toilet back up that it's not leaking again. Sometimes if you don't get a thick enough gasket, or the tile on the floor is not flat, you might still get leakage and you might have to get an additional gasket. Sometimes you have to put 2 gaskets on thick. But for the most part, a number 10 gasket will work on almost any installation. All right, next thing we do is we make sure the toilet is straight. So we look at it, make sure it's lined up, looks pretty good. And then we're going to put the bolt caps back on. If you notice, these plastic retainers that hold the caps on, they have a little marking that says this side up. If you do it the wrong way, it won't stay on. If you do it the right way, it should snap on. So first, the plastic retainer goes on. Then a little steel washer goes on, and then the nut. And you're going to hand tighten these things. And once we get the toilet in the exact position that we want, then we're going to tighten it down. We're going to crank it down. But you don't want to crank it down so hard that you pull the bolts out of the flange, which has been done many times before. And we repeat ourselves on this side here. Check the toilet for, make sure it's straight again. And we're going to crank these down, just so they're a little more than taut. Not too tight, not too loose. If you over tighten them, you could actually crack the toilet. Okay, it's Jeff here again with Jeff's Handyman Service, South Plainfield, New Jersey. We're in the process of replacing the toilet gasket. We're about 90% done with it. In the process, we saw that the flapper was worn out. So I have a new flapper here. I'm going to install that. It's very simple. Problems that relate to a flapper needing installed or replaced is if the toilet leaks a little bit. In other words, if it continues to run, or if it drains slowly out without you pressing the flusher, probably the toilet flapper is worn out and it's not making a good contact with the base here. So to replace it, it's pretty simple. Just put the new one on the bottom here, clip the 2 little ears on. This is actually called the flush valve, flapper, fill valve. This one has a little float on it, and what the float does is that allows you to adjust when the flapper closes based on the level of water in the tank. You don't actually have to have that float, that little foam float on there, but some of the toilets work better with them. I just happen to have this one in the truck, so we're going to put this one on. Most of the flappers are universal for a 3-inch hole, or a 3-inch flush valve is what this is. Some of the newer toilets have a 4-inch flush valve, which is a little bit stronger. It doesn't use any more water. But we're going to clip this metal clip on the top here on the flush handle, like that. All right, and then we're going to put the chain on and adjust the chain so when the flush lever is down, there is a little bit of slack on the chain, but not too much. Clip it on and then clip it on here, and you can always adjust it. All right, so now if you look, there's no tension on the chain until I actually pick up on the flush lever. Okay, you could cut this extra chain off, or what I do is I just put it right on the hook. And then if you ever need to adjust it longer or shorter, you have the extra chain. All right, now I'm going to hook back up the supply line, the stainless steel supply line. They're all universal as long as it says for a toilet. I recommend replacing this supply line. This one has been replaced already. If it has a rigid supply line, which is typically copper, once you take them off, they leak. So this one's been replaced with a new one already. This is a 3/8 inch compression to, what is it, a 5/8 inch toilet fill. All right, want to make sure that's on tight. Not super tight, but just tight enough that it comes in contact with the gasket, and then turn it about another 3/4 of a turn. Now we're going to turn the water supply back on. Okay, one thing you have to be careful about with these water supply valves is sometimes when they've been sitting for a long time, they get very hard to turn. You have to be very careful when you turn them off, because you can break it and it can create a flood. So if anything happens, be ready to know where your water shutoff is in the basement of the house, where the main shutoff is, so you can shut the water off if anything were to happen. But in this case, this one's been serviced recently and it doesn't need to be replaced. Now the toilet's filling up. Actually, I'm going to dry this up and make sure there's no leaks. Okay, another issue we have sometimes when we shut the water off at the supply is that the valve will start leaking. From being off for so long, the gasket gets a little dry. So what you want to do is you want to turn it on until it's on the whole way, and then you gently want to tighten this nut here, and we just crank this a little tighter, and sometimes that will stop this from leaking right here just by tightening up the gasket here. You want to check to make sure there's no water coming out of here. You also want to check this fitting right here to make sure it's good and tight. It's a little loose. You don't want to crank them so tight that you ruin, there's a little rubber grommet in there, and if you turn them too tight, you'll break that grommet and it won't seal. So I think we've solved this one, and this one's fine. All right, so now we're going to test the toilet to make sure it's not leaking. Notice that the level in the fill tank is about 1 inch below the overflow. That can be adjusted by moving the fill valve down or up. Okay, so we're going to test it. Okay, come over here. So I need to adjust this float because it's causing this to close too quickly. So I'm going to adjust it down so it stays open while it's draining. Okay, so now we've adjusted the flapper float down so it stays up longer and will allow the toilet to flush completely. This is an older toilet. It was built in 1987, so it requires a little bit more water than some of the newer ones to flush. So we almost need to empty out the tank or reservoir completely in order to flush this toilet. But that is fixed. Okay, so now the final thing we do is we put the lid back on the toilet. Be careful not to crack it. It is ceramic and they will crack. And then we're going to put the caps back on. They just snap on. Make sure our floor is dry. You can use the toilet paper method to make sure your supply line is not leaking by putting that underneath here and leaving it for a few minutes, and just make sure there's no drips. Other than that, we're done. This is Jeff with Jeff's Handyman Service signing off. Just wanted to make sure you're more comfortable with changing the toilet gasket yourself now. If you ever run into any difficulty with any handyman projects, please give me a call. I'm in North Jersey. My company is Jeff's Handyman Service, and my phone number is 908-403-8900. Thank you for watching this video.